Hello, Danny here from Danny's Scrappy Chicks, and today I want to share with you some exciting little just simple techniques to do with stamping. And whether you're new to stamping or not new to stamping, that's okay, because you just might learn a few different tricks anyway. So if you have any comments as I go, please make them into the comments section. However, I will come back to them later, just because I can't demo and type to you at the same time. So if you're new to the Close to My Heart stamps, they come in this beautiful envelope to help protect them, great for storing them in and things like that. They are a acrylic based stamp, so they're what we call a cling stamp. So they are attached to this carrier sheet that has all the stamps printed on it so that you can put them back in the same places, and you're simply just peeling them off and placing them onto a block. Now, some of our stamps also come with matching thin cuts, or what you might know as die cuts, and generally for most of them they all fit in with the stamp packet as well. And you can tell those when you're looking at our catalogues either online or you're picking up a set somewhere and you're looking at it. This blue outline means that it has a thin cut. So for example, this particular set, all of these stamps have a thin cut. The other way too, on the stamp carrier sheet, so the plastic that it sticks to, there is a black outline around the stamp. So depending on how you like to store them, I always keep my thin cuts with the stamps, but I know some people don't. It does mean later on if you pick up a stamp set and you go, oh, it's got a line around it, there is a thin cut or a die cut, you can go and find that as well. All right, now some basic stamping technique. I do have this cute little chart here available. If you're watching and you're in my virtual workshop group today, it is up in the files section. If you are not part of that group and you would like a copy of that, please either send me a message or comment in the comments section and I will touch base with you and I can email that out to you. So I'm just going to put that aside for now. The first thing I want to do with any stamp, you want to make sure that it's attached to your block nicely. Now, if you're using what I love to call pre-loved stamps, and you know they've been used already and they're not so clingy, washing them in hot soapy water, just your dishwashing liquid is fine. Just hand wash them, give them a rub. It'll just remove all of the oils and things that are attached to them that makes them less sticky. Let them air dry, and then they'll be good to go to cling to your block again. As you can see, our Close to My Heart blocks are actually quite thick, and they have these little indentations on the side for your fingers. The other thing I like is that all our blocks on one side have a line engraved into them, so that if I was doing something that I needed straight on, I can be lining it up along that line. My next step is that I need to season the stamp. Now I do this by rubbing it up and down my arm, great little exfoliation trick, but you can also rub your fingers and things on it, that's fine too. I'm just wanting to get a little bit of the oils onto my stamp before I use it. It helps the ink stick to the stamp. A couple of other things that is helpful when you're stamping is using a spongy type mat. Now this is our Versamat, so if I turn this over, the other side of this is a sponge. It's great for stamping on. The other thing I'm going to do is put down a scrap piece of paper, because if the paper that I'm stamping onto is slightly smaller, I don't really want to have ink on my spongy side, just because it'll be my luck, I'll then rub my hand in it or I'll put a piece of paper on it and put ink everywhere. So I'm just starting with a small scrap of our white cardstock, and our first stamping technique is called solid stamping, and that is literally where you take your ink pad, and I'm going to choose raspberry. Now all our ink pads are a magnetic open, so you can just open them up nice and easy. And the instructions on the sheet, if you're following along on the sheet or when you get the sheet and you want to go back to it, literally talk about placing your stamp on the thing, twist, twist, twist a couple of times, tap, 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 tap. I'm a tap girl. You don't need to tap super hard, but you can tap, 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 tap. And I like to look at it, check how it's going with ink. If I want to test it, all right, I can Tested on my scrap paper. Oh, very happy with that. And so this is just what we call solid stamping. If my kids were here, they love to do the twist. They think it's hilarious. And I'm just going to stamp that onto my white cardstock. If you leave it pressed for a few seconds, it allows more of the ink to absorb into the paper and you actually end up with a darker stamp impression. So that's always good to know. Now I've just realized the joys of live that I had forgotten my stamp chamois. So bear with me. I'm just going to grab that. Cleaning your stamps is something that I do recommend. Now, it is really up to you what you choose to clean them with. Some people do suggest baby wipes and things like that. I personally like our stamp chamois. Now, it dries and it goes hard. Just need to add some water to it and you'll see it starts to crinkle up. So I'm just going to absorb a bit more of that water. Good thing it was in this little tub, hey? Nice and easy. Oh, you can see I haven't washed my stamp chamois in a little while. But anyway, doesn't matter. They do start out a nice brilliant blue, but this has been used a lot. I tend to keep mine in a container just so that when I'm done, I can just rub my stamp into it and then it brings off most of the ink. Now, one thing about acrylic stamps is that they will stain. Doesn't matter. It just shows that they're loved. It doesn't affect them at all. I can still see through my acrylic block and see my stamp for placement and things like that when I'm stamping it onto my page. So I'll keep that to the side. All right, so we've done some solid stamping. The next stamping is what we call first and second generation, or even third generation. Now, I'm just going to choose a slightly smaller stamp. So our blocks do come in a number of different sizes. So this is the mini. It's always good to try and choose a block that is as small as you can get for the stamp so that you've got less space around. If you'd like to rock your stamp a little bit in the ink, some people do, they rock from side to side, then you end up with ink, or you can, on the edges of your stamp. So by having the smaller stamp, you've got less area to do. So I always do check my stamps, make sure there's no ink on the edges, wipe it off. You could use your stamp chamois to wipe it off. So when we stamp for the first time, it's called our first generation. When you stamp again, it's a second generation. And when you stamp again, it's called a third generation. And so it gets lighter and lighter. So this is a fun technique to use when you're perhaps doing some stamping on a project and you're doing clusters of stamps. And so you can do first, second or third generations to get different tonings and just give some visual interest to what you're stamping. So again, just clean that off a little bit. All right, our next one that I want to show you is what we call random stamping. And so it's not really as random as it sounds, but it's just a method that you can use to create, say, backgrounds, your own patterned paper, those sorts of things. So you start, the rule of thumb is you start in the corner of your cardstock or whatever you're stamping on. Now, I always like to stamp off, which is the other reason why I have this scrap paper, and so that it looks like that pattern would continue beyond the page. So it makes it look a bit more realistic as opposed to if you just stamped in the middle. From there, I'm going to work in rough visual triangles. Whoops, I didn't ink the bottom of that up well. And it's the beauty of some clear stamps, excuse my head. I'm just going to go back over the top of that, just makes it a bit darker. And I might even turn on a bit of an angle for random stamping. Didn't clean the side of my block, didn't listen to my own instructions. And so from there, I'm just going to continue. Keep missing that bottom. What am I doing wrong? I'm just going to continue stamping randomly, so including some on and off the page. And so this is where I can go, oh look, I can fix that little mistake that I made before. And it's gone. And so I'm just putting them in randomly to fill the space. Okay. Again, coming back in and filling in some of those gaps. Oops, I smudged that one a little bit, but that's okay. It's a handmade thing, right? People aren't going to care. Put that one there. And you just keep going about it as random as you like. I really don't like the bottom. I'm rocking the other way on my stamp today. But you do get the idea, which is what I'm after. And after all, handmade isn't perfect. So that is our random stamping. So I bring that back and show you all of that. So again, I'm just going to clean that off. Now, when you do use the stamp chamois or something similar, I like, if I'm going to use that same stamp again, but perhaps in a different colour, I'm just going to stamp back onto my scrap paper, or scratch paper as close to my heart likes to call it in the American term, just to dry that stamp off a little bit. Nothing worse than going into the next ink colour and the water that's still on your stamp, or if you've used a wet wipe or something, mottles the ink that you're using. All right, the next one is a fun one. This is called Rock and Roll. And I'm going to go back to the flower for this one. And you're actually using two colours. So this is our ballerina ink, and I've got the raspberry ink. Now, I know this looks quite orange, but it is actually quite pink when I stamp that. Whoops. Stamp that off. It's quite pink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink up with the lightest colour first. And then I'm coming to my darker colour, and I'm holding my stamp block on an angle. So I am going to get the edges of my stamp block, but I am literally rolling that stamp around in the ink. So you can see there, hopefully, that the edges of my stamp are actually a darker colour. And then I'm going to, oh, I've got a bit of dust in my stamp, I can see that, but oh well. I'm going to stamp that down, hold those few seconds to get the extra good print, and voila. I have a two-tone stamp with the edges all thing. The less of the angle you put into the darker colour, the longer, like the bigger area of darker you'll get. So if I had been on more of an angle, I would have got more of just the tips. So you just need to play with that until you get the look that you desire. The next one that I'm going to show you is what we call ombre stamping. I'm just going to put this pink out of the way before I put my arm in it. And for this, we are using the same stamp. I'm just going to put that back over there. And we're going to, but you're going to be inking it. Hang on, rub it on my wrist. It's a new stamp. Ink it up. Now, to season your stamps, you could do it every time if you wish. You don't have to. I tend to do it when I first get them. If for some reason it's not stamping correctly, I might do it again. So I'm just going to do a test stamp here on that one. Fabulous. Or after I've washed my stamps, I tend to re-season. So for an ombre stamp, I'm going to stamp my image onto my scrap paper. I'm going to pick my stamp up, and I'm going to just put the bottom section of my stamp back onto the ink. All right. And I'm going to go onto my page. And voila, I have an instant ombre look. Now I know I did that to the side because there is a couple of different ways you could do this. So I could ink it up, stamp onto my scratch paper. If you trust yourself, I can do my second generation, so that's my light. I can go back to my ink pad and ink it up. I don't think I got in the middle of that well. There we go. And lining it up, lining up my letters, and then stamp again on the same spot. All right. So there's two ways you can be doing that depending on the look, etc. that you're after, or how much you trust yourself, really. You may find the first method is a bit easier. I had something on my stamp then, I didn't realise. So that's the ombre stamping. Now, the last technique that I want to show you is what we call masking. So this requires you to have a scrap of something. Now, I like to use sticky notes for this. It does make it easier, and you'll see why in just a moment. So I'm just going to clean that love you off. Rub it on the thing, put that away. I'm going to come back to my cute little flower stamp, and I want to stamp this. So I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to stamp this onto where I want it, and I want to add some leaves to this. All right, so I'm going to stamp it again onto my sticky notes, just using up that ink second generation. Doesn't need to be the best of stamps. And I've deliberately stamped part of it where the sticky is on my sticky note, so that's this end, so that I can stick it to my page. Now what I want to do, and I couldn't have chosen a fussier stamp to do this with, I'm sure, is just trim this up in the area that I want my leaves to go. So I'm just using our micro tip scissors. They get in nice and into the points where I want them to be. My other tip when you're cutting is to turn your paper to your scissors rather than turning your scissors to the paper. It just makes it more comfortable for you when cutting. All right, I think that's going to be enough. So now I'm going to stick that over my original stamp. So this is acting as a mask. I'm going to grab what I next want to stamp, which is this lovely little leaf pattern here. Oh, I can't get to my carrier sheet. There it is. So again, it's another newbie. Now, one other thing about stamps too, if I wanted to change directions of things, because these are acrylic and they're quite bendy, I could bend that around if I wanted to, anything like that. So you can, so if you've got curved words, you can straighten them. If you've got straight words, you can curve them, those sorts of things. Now, I forgot to bring a green, so I'm just going to do it in black. Won't be quite as pretty, but that's okay. So, inking up my stamp, and what I'm going to be doing is lining up my leaves so that it goes onto my masked section and also onto my card. So then when I peel away my mask, you can see that it looks like my leaves are underneath my flower petals. So quite effective if you're doing things like that. If you've got stamps that are, say, a flower and a leaf, you can be masking different sections to do different colors. So again, I'm just going to clean that off. So yeah, that is our last technique for today. As I said, if you've got any questions, stick them in the comments. If you want a copy of the technique chart, I'm happy to email you out that or send it to you via Facebook Messenger or whatever. So be sure to send me a message that you'd like that or write it in the comments and I can message you. Have a great day, guys. Bye.